Welcome back for another edition of Paper Trails. For this edition, I wanted to kind of give like a, special Black History shout out. FBA, we go by, many, names these days. But, the young people, they leaning more towards FBA. I have no problem with it. It speaks to exactly what the situation is. We built the foundation of what is America. So, it is what it is. But with that said, let's hop on into the topic of this video, which is Black leadership, power, and the cost of resistance, and the cost that comes with leadership in general. So, Black leadership in America has never followed a single path. It's taken religious form, it's taken political form, cultural forms, militant forms, even, and institutional forms. But across time, the same pattern gets repeated often. The closer a leader gets to collect black power, the greater the resistance they face. So let's start at the beginning. In the early 19th century, David Walker issued Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World, one of the most radical anti slavery texts ever written. He died suddenly in 1830. So, not officially assassinated, but widely believed to have been poisoned. Next, you have Nat Turner, who led the most famous slave rebellion in U.S. history. He was captured and executed in 1831. His death wasn't an assassination, it was really more of a public warning of what would happen if you Negroes try to goddamn rise up and try to, come up out of this bullshit that we got you up under. Next, you have Frederick Douglass. Despite surviving multiple assassination attempts, he died naturally in 1895. He was tolerated because he challenged slavery, but ultimately worked within the state. So he was like one of them soft blacks, basically. Like you rebellious, but you ain't too rebellious, so we'll let you live. That type of shit. Then came the post Reconstruction era. So now you have individuals like Ida B. Wells, who exposed lynching and white terror. Um, she lived, but under constant threat, surveillance, and exile from the South. Booker T. Washington was not assassinated. His accommodationist approach made him acceptable to white power structures. And that distinction matters because leaders who challenge the system directly faced a different fate. In the early 20th century, Marcus Garvey built the largest black mass movement in history. He was not assassinated, but instead, the state destroyed him through surveillance, imprisonment, and of course, deportation. They got him up out of there. You know what I'm saying? So that's what happened with Marcus Garvey. At the same time, Noble Drew Ali promoted black national consciousness through religious identity. He died in 1929 of officially of natural causes, but under disputed circumstances after police custody. Again, destabilization without overt assassination. Now we hit the civil rights era, and this is where it get a little bit more blatant and in your face. Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968 after shifting from civil rights to economic justice and anti war politics. Medgar Evers was assassinated in 1963 for voter registration work. Malcolm X was assassinated in 1965 after breaking from the Nation of Islam and building international alliances. So let me just stop right there and kind of just roll it back a little bit. Martin Luther King, he had, there's always going to be controversy with Martin Luther King. Regardless of what you say about him, he did push the needle forward for us. Yes, he smashed white joints. Yes, he was boule. And regardless of all of that shit, he still is one of them ones you gotta put respect on his name. Medgar Evers, while when I say that they were assassinated for voter registration work, don't take that phrase lightly. You always hear the phrase, or black people say, oh, well, our people died so that we could vote. No, you already had the right to vote back in 1865 once cats got freed up, depending on their location in the South. Cats was in positions of power already. The early 1900s, late 1890s to 1900 was when whites, through hook and by crook and through murder and often massacres, scared our people away from the voting booths. So then we lost that voting power. We kind of gave it up. Really, the work he did was to get people back in tune. No, y'all need to hit this voting box because that's the power we used to have. You know what I'm saying? So going back to Malcolm X, he was assassinated, breaking from the Nation of Islam and building international alliances. Now, it gets a little deeper than that, and those people in the comments who are going to come will probably elaborate on top of what I'm going to tell you. Yes, Malcolm X did have issues with the Nation of Islam, and I'm not going to take nothing away from the Nation of Islam, but obviously, like any power structure where there's already an existing head, if you have another person who becomes equal or greater value than that original person, there's going to be a threat to that power. Elijah Muhammad directly or indirectly felt a way about it, and there was some kind of friction between Malcolm X. Once he went solo, we're going to treat it like a rap situation. He went solo, and the nation was feeling kind of salty at that time. You know what I mean? That's like Ice Cube when he left NWA. Like, yo, this was the cat that was writing all the rhymes. Not to say that they didn't have no bars over there before Malcolm got there, but once Malcolm got there, he took it to a whole next level. So between that piece, in conjunction with the Ku Klux Klan, in conjunction with the FBI, in conjunction with J. Edgar Hoover, who directly, indirectly, there's a quote out there saying, associated with J. Edgar Hoover that said, "Black prosperity is a threat to national security," and this technically applies to all of these individuals, but more so none other than MLK and Malcolm X. Those were the two that had the potential to really put the bow on this thing and bring some shit to a whole other level that we probably can't even imagine had they both lived, and not only lived but came together collectively and kind of put their shit together. So, Malcolm X, he got, done dirty by his own people, but we know that his own people, those niggas, were in the employ or under the influence of the FBI as well as other haters. And we'll just leave it like that. All right, moving on. Fred Hampton was assassinated in his sleep in 1969 by Chicago police in coordination with the FBI. Assassination, 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 assassination. It gets more blatant because these cats were turning the volume up Fuck all that, we shall overcome. Like, it was getting more active to where these white people were like, damn, these niggas really might overcome. Kill him, kill him, kill him. Like, dead ass. You know what I'm saying? So this ain't coincidence. This is escalation. The greater the chance that niggas might actually overcome and rise up, equality, justice, the greater aggression and violence level them devils had to ramp up to prevent that shit from happening. And that's just what it is. You know what I mean? That's what fucking history is telling you. I ain't write that shit. They did. It's his story. Anyway, so you contrast that with the leaders who survived, right? You have Rosa Parks. She was not assassinated. Her role was catalytic in sparking off the whole modern civil rights movement of that time. But overall, she still wasn't a major threat to white supremacy as these other individuals who were assassinated. You know what I'm saying? Bayard Rustin lived, but was sidelined due to his sexuality and political independence. Thurgood Marshall survived because his power was absorbed into the legal system. Now, fast forward, you got Huey P. Newton, was not assassinated by the state, but died violently after years of surveillance and internal destabilization. You have Angela Davis, survived because she became international, intellectual, and visible. You know, I would, really say she was always intellectual. She just got international, and the more globally her connects became, the worse it looked for the ops. Like, if we get her now, then we really gonna look as racist as everybody think we are. So she kind of checkmated them devils dead, right? Um, Asada Shakur, she survived by exile, living but never free. Asada Shakur, hey, she's as long as she living, we know who she is. We know her contributions. So that's all that matters. She living. And then today, you have people like Barack Obama was not assassinated because his leadership operated entirely within the guardrails of white supremacy. You know what I mean? He never was really a threat to begin with. He was and I say this respectfully, right? Because I do appreciate the visual from the historical impact. Um, to see, a black person in the White House, cool, but in the bigger picture, what was really done specifically for black people? Nothing. So he would never be a threat to white supremacy to even fall into those categories as the other leaders, right? The Black Lives Matter founders, not assassinated, but face surveillance, legal pressure, and delegitimization. Whoop de doo, right? Because they were ultimately founded by whites who wanted to get ahead of a situation before it got out of control. You create the opposition. If you create the opposition, you control the opposition. That's what the majority of them BLM founders were. You know what I mean? Dudes got record deals and mansions and all this shit after this so-called political movement. I don't know. That shit ain't adding up. But what does this tell us? Black leaders are not targeted simply for being loud. They are targeted when they organize, unify, internationalize, and threaten power, white power. Religious leaders are destabilized, political leaders are neutralized, revolutionary leaders are eliminated, and reformist leaders are absorbed. Now, the question is not whether black leadership is allowed, the question is what kind and on whose terms. So, this goes into another video I did. I know I did a video on these newer so-called black leaders. You have to go into the archives of the Paper Trail playlist. A lot of these newer black leaders are not American. The ones that are, they not built from the same cloth of these earlier black leaders. Two, a lot of them once again are foreign, and that's by design. A black person that is not from America that's put into a position of so-called power over the black community can fool the black population who aren't politically savvy to think and say, well, I never heard of this guy. Where did this guy come from? And why does this guy have an African or a Jamaican or a Haitian or whatever accent? And he's supposed to be allegedly representing a black American. Not to say that they can't, but you got to understand the reality. People who are outside of the FBA or the black American culture that are put into these positions of power do not understand the racial history, the racial politics. They don't understand the past or the present issues. They don't understand how the past issues are the fucking present issues. They understand none of that. For them, it's just some information. For us, it's reality. It's deeper than that. You know what I'm saying? So when you have puppets, which I just gotta straight say it like it is, when you have puppets that are put into these positions of power, they're gonna follow the white agenda to a T. You know what I mean? And I could sidetrack to some other shit, but I'm not. I save my other shit for another video. But with that said, hopefully y'all you know, enjoyed the little gem today. If you got other people that you would like to kind of hear about or know about, or some of these people for a little bit more in depth, hit the comments, like, subscribe, hate, debate, agree, disagree. You know what to do. And I'll catch y'all on the next one.